My own daughter fired me from the family business, claiming I was too old and out of touch. I said nothing, just packed my things. A month later, she showed up at my house crying. Why didn't you warn me about the IRS? I handed her a letter. I did. You just never listened. What she read inside made her collapse on the porch. I built Miller and Company, logistics from the ground up. Every nail, every dollar, every sleepless night, it all belonged to me. And for 35 years, I ran it with everything I had. It wasn't just a business, it was my life's work. But life has a cruel sense of humor. I sat in my office, the same one I had sat in every morning since 1989, staring across my desk at my own daughter, Alice. She was 34 now, sharp, ambitious, and stubborn as hell. She had worked at the company since she was fresh out of college, and over the years, she climbed the ranks, proving herself every step of the way. I was proud of her, always had been. But today, as she sat there with a folder open in front of her, looking at me with a stiff, professional expression, I knew something was off. Dad, this isn't easy for me, she began, smoothing out the papers in front of her. I chuckled, though there was no humor in it. Well, when someone says that, it usually means it's about to be real damn easy for them. She sighed. I need to make some changes. I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. Okay, so make them. She swallowed. I mean, big changes. I felt my stomach tighten. Say what you need to say, Alice. She hesitated, then pushed the folder toward me. It was a termination agreement. For me. My eyes flicked up to hers. Is this a joke? She shook her head. Dad, it's time. I stared at her, feeling something inside me crack open. Time for what? She straightened her back. You've done an incredible job building this company, but things are changing. The industry is evolving, and we need new strategies. You're not adapting. I let out a slow, measured breath. So what you're saying is, I'm too old. I'm saying you're out of touch, she said softly. You don't see the way the market is shifting. I do, and I need to take the company in a new direction. I clenched my jaw. Alice, this business, my business, has provided for you your entire life. You think I don't know how to run it? She swallowed hard, but her expression remained firm. Dad, I respect everything you've done, but you're set in your ways. We need fresh ideas. Fresh ideas. That was corporate speak for get out of the way, old man. I sat there, staring at the papers. Who else knows about this? I asked quietly. The board has already approved it, she admitted. That was the final nail in the coffin. I exhaled through my nose, then reached over, grabbed the folder, and flipped it shut. All right, I said. Alice blinked. Wait, what? I nodded. If you want me gone, I won't fight you. This is what you want? Fine. She hesitated, as if expecting an argument. But I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. Instead, I stood up, walked to my filing cabinet, and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I placed it on the desk and slid it toward her. What's this? She asked. A letter, I said simply. Read it when you have time. Then I grabbed my coat, looked around my office one last time, and walked out. Alice didn't say a word. She didn't even try to stop me. The house felt different after that. Too quiet. Too still. I woke up early the next morning out of habit, made coffee, and just sat there. For years, my life had revolved around Miller and Company. Now, I had nowhere to be. Ella, my wife, noticed. You miss it, don't you? She asked one evening, sitting beside me on the back porch. I shrugged. I miss feeling useful. She reached for my hand. You're useful, Jack. You always have been. She'll realize it soon enough. I wasn't so sure. A month later, Alice showed up at my doorstep. She looked like hell. Her usually neat blonde hair was a mess. Her blazer was wrinkled, and her eyes were red from crying. She clutched a crumpled envelope in her shaking hands. Dad, her voice cracked. I crossed my arms. Alice. She swallowed hard. Why didn't you warn me about the IRS? I raised an eyebrow. I did. She blinked, confused. What? Wordlessly, I walked to my desk, opened the drawer, and pulled out a copy of the letter I had left her the day she fired me. I handed it to her. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it, her eyes scanning the words. Then, her face went pale. She stumbled back a step, her breath hitching. I knew exactly which part she was reading. If you cut costs the way you're planning, the IRS will flag it as suspicious. If you change the payroll structure too fast, they'll audit you. And if you fire me without reviewing the tax documentation I've been handling personally for years, you'll be in over your head before you even realize it. Alice let out a broken sob. They're coming after me, Dad. They're THR-teaming to freeze the company accounts. I don't know what to do. For the first time since she fired me, I saw her again. The little girl who used to run to me when she scraped her knee, who used to hold my hand when she was scared. I sighed, rubbed a hand down my face, then gestured toward the kitchen. Come inside, Alice, I said. We've got work to do. She let out a shaky breath and nodded. And just like that, I was back. Alice followed me inside, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor as she wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She looked exhausted. More than that, she looked defeated. I walked to the kitchen table and pulled out a chair. Sit, I said. She hesitated, then sank into the seat like her legs couldn't hold her up anymore. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Start from the beginning. She took a shaky breath. A few weeks after you left, her voice wavered. She swallowed hard. I got a letter from the IRS. At first, I thought it was just a standard notice, so I didn't worry about it. But then more letters started coming. And then a call. They said we triggered an audit, that we had discrepancies in our tax filings. I nodded slowly. Of course you did. Alice's head snapped up. What do you mean, of course we did? I exhaled, rubbing a hand over my jaw. Alice, I handle the tax filings personally every quarter. The changes you made? They were reckless. You cut payroll in a way that sent up red flags. You moved company assets without covering your tracks properly. And you fired me before I could finalize the last quarter's report, which meant the IRS saw a gap in documentation. Her face crumpled. I didn't know. I shook my head. No, you didn't listen. She flinched. Silence filled the room. I let her sit with that for a moment before I pulled out a chair and sat across from her. How bad is it? I asked. Alice swallowed, her fingers gripping the edge of the table like it was the only thing keeping her upright. They're threatening to freeze our accounts. If they do that, we won't be able to pay suppliers. We'll default on contracts. Miller and Company could go under within a month. My jaw tightened. Jesus Christ. I had expected some fallout, but not this. How much do you owe? She hesitated. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, $480,000. A slow, heavy silence filled the kitchen. I let out a long breath, pressing my fingers against my temple. 480 grand? She nodded miserably. I shook my head. How the hell did you let it get this bad? She swallowed. I thought I was making smart moves, Dad. I cut expenses where I thought we were bleeding money. I streamlined operations. I even hired an outside consultant. I gave her a hard look. Who? She hesitated. Jonas Whitmore. I stiffened. Jonas Whitmore? I repeated slowly. Alice bit her lip. Yeah. I exhaled sharply, pushing back my chair. Unbelievable. That bastard has been circling our company for years, waiting for me to step aside so he could sink his teeth in. And you hired him. Alice's eyes filled with fresh tears. He said he could help. I let out a humorless laugh. Yeah, I'm sure he did. Let me guess, he convinced you to shift company funds, restructure assets, and make risky financial decisions under the guise of optimizing cash flow? Alice didn't answer, but her silence told me everything. I sighed, running a hand through my graying hair. You got played, Alice, I said finally. She nodded miserably, looking down at her lap. I know. I rubbed my temples. Jonas Whitmore. That snake had been trying to edge his way into my company for years. And Alice, desperate to prove she could lead without me, had walked right into his trap. I pinched the bridge of my nose. All right, first things first, we need to get ahead of this audit before the IRS makes a move. Alice looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. You'll help me? I met her gaze, my jaw tightening. You're my daughter, I said. I'm not going to let you drown. Her lip quivered, and for a second, I thought she was going to cry again. But instead, she nodded quickly and wiped her face. Okay, she whispered. I stood up, my mind already racing through the steps we'd need to take. Damage control was going to be a nightmare, but it wasn't impossible. I just hope we weren't already too late. Alice sat there, gripping the edge of the table like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. I could see the desperation in her eyes, the weight of her mistakes pressing down on her shoulders. She wasn't the same confident, stubborn woman who had fired me a month ago. No, this was my daughter, scared, lost, and completely out of her depth. I sighed, rubbing a hand over my face. All right, I said, my voice firm. We need to act fast. First, I need to see everything. All the documents, contracts, tax filings, payroll changes. Everything you touched since I left. Alice nodded quickly. Okay, I brought my laptop and some files in the car. I can go get them. Go, I said. She practically ran to the door. As soon as she was gone, I leaned back in my chair and exhaled, staring at the ceiling. Damn it, Alice. I had warned her. But she had been so eager to prove herself that she hadn't listened. And now, she was on the verge of destroying the very thing she had fought to control. A few minutes later, she came rushing back in, arms full of paperwork, her laptop tucked under one arm. She dumped everything onto the kitchen table, flipping open the laptop and pulling up spreadsheets, emails, and tax documents. I don't even know where to start, she admitted, voice shaking. I pulled my reading glasses from my pocket and put them on. Let's start with what the IRS flagged. Show me the first letter you got from them. She clicked through her emails, then turned the screen toward me. I skimmed through the notice. It was exactly what I expected. Red flags on payroll adjustments, unexplained financial transfers, and missing documentation. I looked up at her. You didn't file the fourth quarter tax report, did you? Alice's face paled. I thought it was already done. I shut my eyes for a moment, counting to 5 in my head. Alice, that's the most important filing of the year. It accounts for all end-of-year adjustments. The IRS sees an incomplete report, and they assume you're hiding something. She looked like she was going to be sick. I turned back to the laptop. Let me see the payroll adjustments. Alice hesitated before pulling up a spreadsheet. As soon as I saw the numbers, my stomach twisted. Jesus, you slashed the payroll tax contributions? I asked, my voice dangerously low. She nodded, wringing her hands. Jonas said it was an easy way to free up cash flow without affecting employee wages. I let out a bitter laugh. Yeah, because it's illegal. The IRS doesn't play games with payroll taxes. You short them, and they come after you hard. That's why we always paid on time, even if it hurt the bottom line. Alice buried her face in her hands. I'm such an idiot. I didn't disagree. But right now, there wasn't time for self-pity. All right, I said, standing up. First thing tomorrow, we're calling the IRS and proactively addressing this audit. We need to show them we're cooperating. Second, we need to undo as much of this damage as possible before they dig in deeper. The more they find, the worse it's going to get. Alice nodded rapidly, her hands still shaking. Okay, I'll do whatever you say. I studied her for a moment. She had finally humbled herself. She was finally listening. And God help me, I just hoped it wasn't too damn late. Alice sat there, looking at me like I was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. I glanced back at the spreadsheet, my mind already working through the mess she had created. Payroll discrepancies, missing filings, unexplained financial movements. Jesus Christ. This wasn't just sloppy. It was dangerous. I took a slow breath. All right, I said. First thing tomorrow, we're calling the IRS. But before that, I need a full breakdown of the company's financial status. How much cash do we have on hand? Alice hesitated. She clicked through a few documents, her eyes scanning the numbers. After covering payroll last week, about $210,000 in liquid assets. I was tense. And how much do you owe? She swallowed hard. The IRS is saying $480,000. But with penalties and interest, that could climb. I closed my eyes for a moment, inhaling deeply. I knew it was bad, but hearing that number out loud, it made my blood pressure spike. Jesus, Alice, I muttered. I know, she said quickly. I know, Dad. But I can fix this, right? Can we fix this? I didn't answer her right away. Instead, I pulled out a notepad from the kitchen drawer and started scribbling figures. If the IRS locked up our accounts, we wouldn't even be able to pay employees, let alone suppliers. That would send everything into a downward spiral. I needed leverage. Have you spoken to the bank? I asked. Alice bit her lip. Jonas told me not to. He said it would raise red flags. My head snapped up. Wait a damn second. You're telling me that idiot advised you not to talk to the bank when you were about to get audited? She flinched. He said if we kept things quiet, we'd have more time to fix the books before the IRS got aggressive. I pushed back from the table so fast my chair scraped the floor. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, I said, my voice dangerously low. The bank is your best ally when you're in trouble. If they know what's happening, they can work with you, give you an extension, approve a line of credit, buy you time. But now, they're going to find out when the IRS starts freezing assets, and instead of helping you, they're going to panic. Alice covered her face with her hands. God, I'm so stupid. I exhaled sharply, forcing myself to stay calm. Yelling at her wasn't going to fix this. All right, I said, rubbing my temples. We don't have time to waste. First, we reach out to the IRS in the morning. We admit the errors, but emphasize that we're taking corrective action. Second, you and I are going to the bank before they get spooked. We need to secure a line of credit to cover at least part of this debt. Third, Alice suddenly let out a choked sob. I looked up. Her shoulders were shaking, her hands gripping the edges of the table like she was holding on for dear life. Dad, I ruined everything, she whispered, her voice barely there. I fired you. I treated you like you were useless. And now I need you to clean up my mess. I was quiet for a long moment. Finally, I stood up, walked over to the cabinet, and grabbed 2 glasses. I poured a shot of whiskey in each, then slid one toward her. Alice blinked, sniffling. I drink, I said. She hesitated, then picked up the glass with shaky hands and took a sip. I did the same. When I set my glass down, I looked at her, really looked at her. You made mistakes, Alice, I said. Big ones. But you're my daughter. And family doesn't leave family behind. Her eyes filled with fresh tears. You mean that? I met her gaze, my voice firm. I wouldn't be sitting here if I didn't. Alice let out a shaky breath, wiped her eyes, and nodded. All right, I said, rolling up my sleeves. Let's get to work. The next morning, we were at the IRS office before they even opened. Alice was practically vibrating with nerves, gripping the folder of documents like it was a lifeline. I, on the other hand, was calm. I had dealt with the IRS before. I knew that panicking wouldn't get us anywhere. A woman named Ms. Davenport met us in a small, windowless conference room. She was the kind of person who didn't smile unless absolutely necessary. She adjusted her glasses, looked over Alice's name on the file, and sighed. Ms. Miller, I hope you understand the severity of this situation, she said, tapping the stack of papers in front of her. The IRS flagged multiple inconsistencies in your filings. Some of these payroll tax discrepancies suggest willful negligence. That carries serious consequences. Alice swallowed hard. I never meant to. I raised a hand, cutting her off. Ms. Davenport, I said, keeping my voice level, we're here to cooperate fully. My daughter made mistakes, but we're taking immediate corrective action. We need to know exactly what the IRS need from us to settle this before it escalates further. Ms. Davenport studied me for a moment. And you are? Jack Miller, I said, leaning forward. The former CEO of Miller & Company. The guy who used to handle all this before my daughter's consultant convinced her to make dangerous financial moves. I saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes. She knew my name, probably from years of clean, well-maintained tax filings. That was leverage. She nodded slightly, flipping through the papers. Mr. Miller, under your management, the company had a strong compliance record, which is why this sudden shift raised flags. The IRS assumed either fraudulent intent or incompetence. Alice flinched. I kept my face neutral. Let's assume it was inexperience, not intent. If we make immediate corrections, is there a path to avoid full asset seizure? Ms. Davenport sighed, pushing her glasses up her nose. A settlement may be possible, but it would require full payment of past due amounts plus penalties. And if we negotiate? I asked carefully. She hesitated. Officially, she said, the IRS does not negotiate tax debt unless financial hardship is proven. Unofficially, if you can provide accurate, amended filings and a structured repayment plan, there may be room for leniency. I nodded. That was all I needed to hear. Give us 48 hours, I said. We'll correct the reports and submit an offer. Ms. Davenport sighed. I can hold further action for 3 business days. After that, collections move forward. Understood, I said. You'll hear from us before then. We shook hands, and Alice and I walked out. The second we were outside, she turned to me, eyes wide with disbelief. Dad, how the hell did you do that? I smirked. Alice, I spent 35 years dealing with the IRS. You just have to know how to speak their language. She let out a breath. Okay, now what? I checked my watch. Now we go to the bank. And after that, I gave her a sideways glance. We deal with Jonas. Alice stiffened, but she nodded. Yeah, we do. The meeting at the bank went smoother than I expected. Thanks to my reputation, the branch manager agreed to extend a line of credit. It wasn't enough to cover the entire IRS debt, but it was enough to stop the bleeding. That just left one loose end. Jonas Whitmore. Alice set up a meeting with him at the company office, telling him she needed urgent financial guidance. He took the bait, arriving smug and confident, probably thinking he was about to seal his grip on my company. But when he walked into the conference room and saw me sitting at the head of the table, his smirk vanished. Jack, he said smoothly, regaining his composure. Didn't expect to see you here. I leaned back in my chair. Figured I should clean up the mess you made. His jaw twitched. Mess? He looked at Alice. I thought we had this under control. Alice crossed her arms. Jonas, you lied to me. Jonas let out a fake laugh. Alice, let's not be dramatic. I slid a thick folder across the table. He glanced at it. What's this? I smirked. A forensic financial review of every recommendation you made. Turns out, you didn't just give bad advice. You sabotaged the company. Jonas's face twitched. Alice folded her arms. You told me not to go to the bank. You convinced me to shift funds in a way that triggered an audit. And you just happened to have outside investors ready to step in the second things went south? You were trying to set me up, weren't you? Jonas scoffed. That's ridiculous. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. Jonas, you tried to sink my company so you and your people could buy it for pennies. You saw an inexperienced CEO and thought you could manipulate her. Alice's fists clenched. But you made one mistake. Jonas's eyes flickered with uncertainty. And what's that? Alice's voice hardened. You didn't finish the job before I went back to the one person who actually knows how to run this company. Jonas's fake confidence wavered. This is nonsense. I smiled. No, Jonas. This is nonsense. I tapped the folder. See, Alice may have been naive, but I'm not. And I know exactly how to deal with people like you. His mouth opened, but I cut him off. You have 2 choices, I said. 1, you resign from every consulting position, cut ties with my company forever, and walk away before I report your fraudulent financial dealings to the SEC. Or 2, we drag this into court and make sure every client you've ever worked with knows exactly what kind of snake you are. Jonas's face turned red. He knew I had him cornered. His jaw clenched. You don't have proof. I slid a USB drive across the table. This says otherwise. Jonas hesitated. Then, after a long pause, he let out a bitter laugh. You really don't let go, do you, Jack? I smiled. No, Jonas. I don't. He stood up, yanking his briefcase off the table. Fine. You win. He stormed out. Alice let out a long, shaky breath. You really had a USB full of evidence? She asked. I smirked. No, but he didn't know that. She let out a startled laugh. For the first time in months, I saw relief on her face. I reached over and patted her shoulder. Congratulations, Alice. You just took your company back. She looked at me, her eyes glassy. I never should have pushed you out, Dad. I nodded. No, you shouldn't have. She swallowed. I want you back at the company. For real. I studied her. Then I smiled. Let's talk about that over dinner, I said. And just like that, we walked out of the office side by side. For the first time in a long time, we were a team again.